Okay,
Okay,
go ahead.
so good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us as we were kind of chatting before we got started. We know this is a very busy time for folks, especially parents and families. So we do really appreciate you taking the time. We will hopefully make it worth it and get you out on time. So welcome to Powered Up. We're going to talk about video games and how to keep them fun and healthy for everyone. So a little bit of education, a little bit of getting started on thinking about some of that skill building. We got a lot to cover in an hour, so we'll dive right in. Next up, Kathy. So just a little bit about Kathy and I and kind of who we are and why we're here. So we work for Western Connecticut Coalition, and this is what's called the Regional Behavioral Health Action Organization, or RBHAO, for Demas Region 5. So what that means is we support all things that fall under the behavioral health umbrella, including but not limited to substance use prevention, mental health promotion, suicide prevention, as well as problem gambling awareness, among other things. But so we do that work in 43 towns, covering the greater Danbury, the greater Torrington, and the greater Waterbury areas. And so
Whoops.
we also, that was a great segue. So we also help coordinate the Region 5 Problem Gambling Awareness Team, or we call it the PGAT. There will not be a quiz on any of our acronyms, don't worry. So we coordinate with the help of other local partners as well as our statewide partners, this gambling awareness team. So we've got a lot of folks from a lot of different walks of life, a lot of different roles. We do education and awareness, so like we're doing here today, about disordered gambling, as well as increasing awareness around treatment options. There is a youth component. We support youth initiatives each year. We always are promoting the helpline and other resources. Kathy's got it there on the slide. And as I mentioned, it's really a collaborative effort. So that includes Demas Problem Gambling Services, so our partners at the state and our funders, our friends over at the Connecticut Council on Problem Gambling, and we're lucky enough to have Caitlin Brown with us today from CCPG. We always love working with her, as well as NCCA. So they are our better choice treatment provider in the region. So they provide gambling treatment in our area. But everyone is welcome, community members, parents, folks in recovery. We really have such an open door policy with that group. So that is the link to our page of the website. You can go next, Kathy. So as I mentioned, we're going to cover a lot today in a short amount of time, but hopefully you're going to find it all worthy of your time. So the three main takeaways we're hoping you'll leave with is a better understanding of the prevalence and impact of video gaming here in our country. Hopefully you'll be able to identify the differences between healthy gaming and problematic gaming. And also you're going to learn a little bit, just a little bit of a teaser for the Powered Up program, which is a program that we're kind of piloting, trying to get out there in the state. Kathy's done such an awesome job of getting the word out in our region. And this is a really great program that's designed to help families find balance about video gaming. And that's really key. And hopefully you'll see that kind of theme throughout tonight's talk, is that we're really about finding balance. We're not here to demonize any activity or any particular behaviors. It's really about just promoting a good, healthy balance and keeping young people especially safe. Next slide.
Sorry, Abby. Hold on a second. I did something goofy here that I need to fix. Somehow I hit the whiteboard, I think. So sorry.
All right. So before we get into the content, just a little bit of housekeeping, some nuts and bolts. As Kathy mentioned, this webinar is being recorded. We want to make sure that we can share it with you all for reference, as well as maybe getting that out to folks that weren't able to join us tonight. We will also share a PDF of the slide deck. So if you really kind of want to just sit and process today without kind of taking notes, just know that we'll share that info with you. If you can, we'd appreciate you keeping your cameras on during today's talk. I know a lot of us, Stacy's multitasking. We're all doing the best we can, so we're just happy to have you here. But It does make it so much more engaging, and it feels as close to possible as being in person when you all have your cameras on. So that is our humble request for today. It's so much nicer than presenting to a bunch of boxes. Kathy and I have really put in some time to try and make this as interactive as a Zoom talk can be. So please feel free to engage in discussion. We're going to have some polls and activities. The more you contribute, the less Kathy and I have to talk, and that's just better for everybody. So this is just one little housekeeping thing as far as attendance. If you're using another person's device or a device that doesn't really have a name, if you can either update your name in your Zoom box or at least just put your information in the chat. We just like to know for our purposes who is with us today, and then also who to follow up with the slides and things like that. So if you can take a moment to change your name or just throw that in the chat for us. Please use that chat for any questions you have during the presentation. So Kathy and I are teaming up. So whoever is not actively presenting will be monitoring that chat, and we'll kind of speak up if there is something kind of timely on a certain slide. So please engage using the chat. We love when people kind of share their thoughts in there. And then lastly, we do have a small ask that you complete our evaluation at the end of the training. We'll include a survey link right there in the chat. Every time we do something like this, we want to gauge folks' learning. We want to hear your feedback, how we can make it better for next time. We really take all of our evaluations seriously. So we're hoping you'll take just a minute or two to complete that at the end. So don't sneak off to dinner or off to do laundry or whatever you're doing before you take care of that evaluation. Next slide. All right. So just so we kind of know a little bit more about who's in the Zoom room with us today, we're going to be talking a lot about youth, a lot about young people and young adults. So we just want to know here in the Zoom room with us today, if you have children, grandchildren, or other youth in your life, whether they're yours, somebody else's, maybe professionally, personally, what age are they? And I believe this is set up that you can select more than one. So the children or young people in your life, how old are they? Give you a little bit of time.
I love this. We're getting a wide variety of ages. That's great. Thanks, everybody.
We do have quite a wide range here.
Okay, so I'm going to share those results so that everybody else can see what's going on. Awesome. I purposely put the 21 and over in there just because, you'll see when we talk about the data in a few minutes, we have our adult children to think about as well when we talk about this issue. Thanks.
Yes. Our young adults still have those developing brains, which impacts a lot of what we're talking about. So awesome. It looks like we have some young people in pretty much all of the age categories. So obviously this is when we're talking about gaming and gaming behaviors, it's gonna look a little bit different depending on who you've got kind of in your mind as we're talking about this. So just a little bit of discussion around screen time, because obviously this directly relates to what we're talking about with gaming, video games, and potentially problematic video gaming, right? So this comes right from the American Academy of Pediatrics, and it provides definitely some loose guidelines around screen time. So we know that 18 months and younger, we want to do our best to avoid screen time whenever possible, unless you're, FaceTiming with grandma and grandpa, that kind of thing. Then we've got our 18 to 24 month olds. You still want to limit that screen time. And if they are going to have screen time, is it educational? Is it appropriate, right? 2 to 5 year olds, they've got recommendations of about an hour a day max. You also want to make sure that you know what your youngins are watching, once again, to make sure that it's appropriate. And then here's a pretty big gap, right? Just 6 and up. But you always want to, provide consistent limits, especially with children, on the types of media. And you don't want to let screen time get in the way of things that are really important for development and health, right? So things like sleep, exercise, other activities, hygiene, things like that. So just kind of wrapping our minds around what the American Academy of Pediatrics is saying around screen time. we know that this might not always be what it looks like in real life, right? Anyone with young ones at home might know that that's not exactly what it looks like. So then we have this other really great resource that Kathy included here. So this is a screenshot of a screen time calculator. And this is just an example also from especially during COVID. Oh my gosh, exactly. So from the American Academy of Pediatrics as well, this is kind of a snapshot of an example of a screen time calculator. So just kind of take a moment. I know it's kind of small font there, but if you can read it, just take a little bit of time to process. We've got a good chunk of time for sleep, a good chunk of time for school, 3 hours of homework, but then some of these smaller things like meals, reading, family time, chores or a job, free time. And so here in this calculator, we've got 1 hour of screen time. So it's more food for thought than anything else, everybody. We know that screen time and potentially even games can be woven into some of this, right? That might be how young people spend their free time, or, meals or family time. I told Kathy when I was growing up, meals and family time was when we watched our shows. So, once again, we're not demonizing all screen time here, but just really trying to encourage those healthy behaviors. Next slide.
And I think you bring up a good point too, Abby, that, engaging in some of these activities together is a good thing too, right? So I think you can sort of blur the lines a little bit if you're doing it as a family, like watching a movie, such and such.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I saw Tony's comment in the chat that, some of this, I'm not sure how realistic it is, right? So we've got just a half hour for meals, right? So you're really eating on the go. You might be potentially multitasking there. But so just some general, screen time kind of advice for especially those developing brains, but really everybody, things, and we'll talk about some protective factors and some ways to keep kids' gaming behavior kind of safe and healthy, but things like keeping those screens in shared spaces. If we're all watching TV, let's do it in the living room together. It's a little bit easier to monitor what's going on and how late the TV's on. Also things, and this is great for everybody, trying to limit your screen time before bed. I will admit I have been actively trying to do that for months. It has not worked yet, but we know that that is supposed to help with sleep. And then no screens during meals, which goes exactly against what I had just said about myself. But once again, we're not here to demonize anybody. We're really just talking about encouraging those healthy behaviors as much as possible. All right, so just a couple more do's and don'ts on screen time. And these come from the Powered Up Parent program that Kathy's going to talk about a little bit later, but I think they're really good, just overarching do's and don'ts. So model positive and healthy screen time. So this is really a task for us adults. Are we on our phones all throughout dinner? Are we on our phones before bed, right? So young people and children pay attention to what we're doing and the behaviors that we're modeling. Setting consistent and age-appropriate limits. We know that consistency is really key with young people. And so really setting those consistent, sticking to them, and also making them age-appropriate. Using 5 to 10 minute warnings when transitioning from the screen. Kathy and I talked about this one a little bit when we were preparing for tonight. And I really liked it, especially when we think about how into games and things young people can get. Giving that 5 to 10 minute allows them to kind of regulate, to know that I'm, starting to wind down for the evening. You don't want to go up to the Xbox and just pull the plug out or say you're done and hit the power button. That really, it's providing that communication, letting them know, hey, in 10 minutes or so, we're shutting it down for the night. It allows them to kind of build some of those skills. And then you do want to facilitate engaging, fun, and novel activities that don't include screens. Are young people playing video games because, quote, there's nothing else to do, right? Giving them lots of options. And, we might be surprised at what activities they pick when they're given options. So those are some things we can do. We've also got some things we can try to avoid. Don't demonize screens or video games, right? I know we've all kind of heard people be like, you kids in your dang video games, or you kids in your phones, right? We don't want to demonize screens or video games. We know that they bring a lot of positive things into young people's lives, and we're really trying to promote more of that balance. You want to avoid using screens to regulate emotions. So it's important for kids to learn healthy coping strategies. Once again, we understand that sometimes the kids need to take a minute with the iPad to calm down, right? But we really want to engage more of those healthy coping strategies. If your child is really wound up, really, kind of stressed out, what other skills are we teaching them? We don't want to just plop them in front of the TV, plop them in front of the iPad and use that as their only way to calm down. And then you want to avoid allowing unlimited access. Your child has their phone, a lot of recommendation is to have the phone plugged in charging overnight in a shared space, like in the kitchen or the living room, or something like a TV screen or video games. Don't just let them shut their door, play games until all hours of the night, right? And really, a lot of those last pieces also just involve communication with your child, just like anything else. You don't want your child to just kind of go in their room, close the door, and you don't see them for hours and hours and hours, right? We want to take an interest in our children and our young people's interests. And, oh, what game are you playing? Or, oh, how long have you been playing? Do you want to take a break and go for a walk? Things like that. And those are just some examples. Okay, so we've got a little activity. So we want you to take a moment and think about if you played games, or maybe your siblings or friends played games growing up. What video games did you play or your friends or siblings play growing up? So you can either unmute or you can throw it in the chat. I know throwing it in the chat is easier sometimes, and then we can read them all together. So what games did you play growing up? Zelda. Yep. Zelda, Mario. I love it. Or what game systems did you use too? Tetris, Mario, everything. I love that. Nintendo. Yep. Guitar Hero. Oh my gosh. I haven't thought about Guitar Hero.
Me too.
In forever. Donkey Kong, The Sims. Oh my God. I went through such a big Sims phase, right? We'll give a couple more seconds if anyone else wants to share. What games did you play or your family play? Grew up before video games existed. All right, so that's going to be interesting for our next point. A Striker helicopter game, Castle Wolfenstein, if I'm pronouncing that right, Tetris on a PC. Oh, the handheld games. Oh yeah, or even like a Game Boy, right? And with the white dots. Oh, I love it. Okay, so thank you all so much for participating. Nintendo.
Yeah, I'm glad somebody mentioned the arcade, because I was thinking about that too, that when I was a teenager, we had to go to the arcade to play games. That was actually fun. It was like a social thing that we did.
Yes, exactly. So I know a lot of those are resonating with me. We had a Nintendo 64. We had like the first edition of PlayStation. So things like that. So Kathy and I weren't just asking that for fun, while it was fun, but also the reason we asked you to think about that for a moment is that, or actually, yeah, Kathy, if you want to go ahead and bring in our visuals. Okay. So we've got Pong, we've got Pac-Man. We talked about things like Tetris, Mario. No one mentioned the Wii, but the Wii was also a very good one. So these are just some examples. And the reason we wanted to kind of talk this out and get a little nostalgic is that we have to remember that when we're talking about the video games of today, it is a very different type of video game than when many of us were growing up, right? Very different. So when you were playing on the Nintendo, that had a plug that plugged into the wall for power, and that was it. You could play the games that you had gone to the store and bought, right? You could play with people if they were in the room with you and had a controller. With the arcade, like Kathy mentioned, you went to the arcade, maybe you put a couple quarters in, and when that money ran out, you were done and you went home. Some of these I'm also, you play against a computer, right? So something like Tetris. So we didn't have the massive amounts of connections to others from all over the country and all over the world, the connection to the internet, which we know can be amazing or terrible, right? And also this very immediate access to funds within the video games, right? So if you were on a really hard level of Zelda, you couldn't just put in your Discover card and buy your way to the next round, right? I wish we could. We probably would have dealt with our frustrations a lot better if we could, right? But so we have to remember that a lot of young people today are not playing things like actually people might still be playing The Sims, but it's just a different landscape, everybody. They have instant connection to the internet, to potentially mom or dad's credit card, to people from all over the world. And there's something really beautiful about that, but we want to make sure that we're keeping folks as safe as possible, especially our young people. So Kathy and I were talking about this in preparation, and I just kind of liken it a little bit to the conversations we have in substance use prevention around things like cannabis, right? So oftentimes when you're learning about cannabis, you'll hear someone say, well, this isn't your grandparents' marijuana, right? It's a whole different ball game. We're not talking about joints, we're talking about, you know, wax and things like that. So just remember, when we're learning about the video games of today, it is a whole new ball game. Ball game, that was good. All right. I think
Thanks, Abby.
I'm going to turn it over to Kathy.
Yeah, great. And thanks everybody for participating. We appreciate the engagement. Okay, so I'm going to kind of move us into the next level. And, you know, when we talk about any type of behavioral health issue, it's always good to kind of frame things with some data, right? It kind of gives us an idea of what it looks like. So I'm going to take you through some of these statistics. Over 2.5 billion people play video games worldwide. That's a pretty big number. 73% of Americans aged 2 and older play video games. So it's pretty prevalent, right? Gamers are within the age bracket of 18 to 24, most of them, 18 to 34. And this might surprise you that the average age of a gamer is 35. Abby and I were talking about this as we were preparing, that it is kind of surprising, and I'll show you another graphic in a minute that'll kind of break things down by age a little bit further. Another thing that might surprise you is that 50% of those who game are male and 48% are female. And so these are, again, US statistics, and that might surprise you because I think most folks might assume that it's going to be predominantly the men who are engaging in these activities. But as you can see by this data, it's not. 90% of teens play video games on some type of device, whether it's a PC or a game console or a cell phone or a tablet. Over 92% of teen boys have access to a gaming console, and 41% say they spend too much time playing video games. So just a few data points to frame what gaming looks like here in the United States. And I just want to point out to you that at the bottom of this slide, each of those references of the sources is a link to their website if you want to learn more. Game Quitters in particular is a really great source of information. They're a great resource for prevention of the addiction of gaming. So I encourage you to visit their website to learn more about the data. Does anybody have any questions about any of these points before we move on? And feel free to throw any questions that you have in the chat.
Nothing in the chat so far, Kathy.
Okay, thanks, Abby. So here's a visual that I took from Game Quitter's website that breaks down further what statistics look like by age in the United States. So again, this might be a little bit surprising. I think a lot of folks might assume that most of the people in this country that are playing video games are teenagers, but as you can see, it's 21% for 18 and under. It's 38% for those 18 to 34. So you can kind of see where that average age of 35 kind of comes into play, because the next age category, 35 to 54, is 26%. And we even have 9%, 55 to 64, and 6% of those over the age of 65. So it's pretty prevalent in every age group. And then if we look at some additional demographics, so specifically by ethnicity, predominantly Caucasian Americans are engaged in video gaming, but 15% of Hispanics and 12% are African American as well, and Asian 5%, and those categories, those in other categories are 3%. So just some additional information as we frame what gaming looks like in our country. And this data is from 2020, which is pretty recent. And this data here too is from these 3 different sources, but it's also pretty new from 2019 and 2020. When we do these trainings, we always remind people that sometimes it takes a little time to gather data and publish it. So we're always just a little bit behind, but this is pretty new. So let's talk about what healthy gaming looks like versus problematic gaming. So when gaming is not a problem, and you may know that I noticed that I intentionally put the column of what gaming is not a problem on the left because I want to focus there. When anyone who's engaging in gaming has a healthy balance with everything else that's going on in their life, gaming's not a problem, right? Gaming is fun. People really enjoy using it for entertainment purposes. And so as long as folks have a healthy balance with other things going on in their life, like Abby mentioned, health and nutrition and sleep and having good relationships, it's not a problem. When it's used for good, it can create opportunities for young people and really anyone to use problem-solving skills, to be creative, to enter into worlds that are not like ours. So kind of engaging in almost like a fantasy situation in a very safe way. So that is also not a problem. And when it adds value to an individual's life, it can be used as a way to sort of kick back at the end of the day, blow off a little steam. It can reduce stress and anxiety. It can even increase self-esteem when individuals are able to kind of build their skills. It can make them feel good about themselves because they've been able to achieve something, learn something, or I guess you could say win or get to the next level. So let's think about when gaming is a problem. So these are some of the things that we want to think about. If we see someone we know or love where gaming has sort of taken over their life, where it gets in the way of other interests, their daily activities, they're perhaps not getting their responsibilities taken care of at school or at home, that's when things can become problematic, especially if it's disrupting their sleep. I'll go back to something Abby just mentioned about, maybe not having devices in bedrooms or even phones, having those sort of plugged in overnight in a common area rather than the bedroom, because really it's important for us to get a good night's sleep, just like that media calculator showed us a few minutes ago. If there's impairment in any relationships, where they're just not really spending time with friends, you're having conflicts with your child, things that are going on within the family where, you're fighting about it, things like that can become a problem. If they're withdrawn from school or work, someone just, would rather stay home and play video games than go to school or go take care of their work commitments. And then lastly, they just are playing because they can't stop. Like that's when things start to kind of look more like addiction type of behavior, like not being able to stop. So the differences between when gaming is not a problem and when it is a problem. And for most people, it's not a problem. So as we move into talking a little bit about problematic gaming, here are some of the risk factors, and this is taken from the Powered Up Player program. Individuals who have a diagnosis of, say, an autistic spectrum, autistic disorder, ADHD, any type of mental health issue like depression or anxiety, those individuals could be at higher risk for problematic gaming. I just want to, the caveat there is that these types of conditions are not causal. It just means that there could be an increased risk. Individuals who have few friends or have, just don't have as much opportunity to socialize, or may even have some social anxiety, that could be a risk factor. Someone who doesn't have interest in other activities or just obsesses and can only think about gaming, that's all they want to do. Anyone who's struggling with academics, or maybe have experienced some trauma, and that could be, experiencing violence, bullying, things like that. And lastly, struggles with any family relationships. So these are just some of the things that could be going on in this person's life that could lead them to have higher risk for problematic gaming. And I will say that some of these can kind of cross over into risk factors for substance use as well. And then as we kind of look at this on a continuum, I want everyone to know that there is a diagnosis for a gaming disorder. It is classified as a disease, and this is information from the World Health Organization. Gaming disorder is defined as a pattern of gaming behavior characterized by impaired control, not being able to stop, increased priority given to gaming over other activities. It's taking precedence over other things in their life. And then a continuation or even an escalation of that behavior despite having negative consequences. So those are the kind of defining characteristics of what a gaming disorder looks like. On the left-hand side, you'll see there's a graphic here that's from the Connecticut Council on Problem Gambling that lists some of the warning signs of a gaming disorder. So these are some of the things that you might want to be on the lookout for if you have concerns. And some of this is repetitive, but avoiding school, not wanting to go to school, needing to play longer in order to get that same enjoyment, feeling anxious when they're not playing, or playing more than 6 hours a week, just spending an awful lot of time. And then from game quitters, I pulled this other data point that was from a National Institute of Health study. 3 to 4% of gamers are addicted to video games, and this is worldwide. So that means that there can be as many as 60 million people suffering from a gaming disorder. And I will say that Caitlin and I were talking about this yesterday, that that percentage is similar to what we see in those who experience gambling disorder in our country as well. It's around the same percentage, 3 to 4%. And while that may seem low, it's still a lot of folks. Like if you're looking at the state of Connecticut, I think it's around 50,000 people. And so where are there some similarities between gaming and gambling? So I very intentionally put the definition of gambling at the top of the screen here. It's defined as risking something of value on the outcome of an event when the probability of winning is less than certain. So in other words, you're spending money and you're not really sure if you're going to win, right? There's no guarantees. That is the definition of gambling. So it's important for folks to know when we talk about harm reduction and responsible gambling, we talk about making sure that folks understand that there are risks involved. Gambling is not a risk-free activity. So in some ways, there are some similarities of things that can go on during video gaming that kind of fall in the same category. And so here's a few examples. Some games offer what are called login rewards. So you get a reward back just by logging in. And so that can kind of create this sort of habitual situation where the individual is going to be logging in, maybe because they think that they might be winning something. So it just kind of creates this like reward system that's going on with the individual instead of just them deciding on their own that they want to play. Microtransactions, those are purchases of virtual items. They may or may not improve the level of play. And some of the examples are purchasing character skins, like different outfits and especially weapons. The example on the right-hand side there of the picture from Fortnite shows kind of what the screen looks like when you're when you're in their shop. They call it a shop, where you can purchase these different things that may or may not enhance your game. And it starts out small, like they may not be very expensive, and to play the game is usually free. They call it free play. But these types of transactions can build up. And if you're going for more elite items, the costs just continue to increase. So it's something to be aware if your children are playing games online, and if they have access to the credit card as well. It's something I just wanted to insert there to make sure that everyone knows that this is a potential risk, and we should make sure that we know, what the how kids are, whether or not they're engaging these activities and how they're paying for them. And then lastly, loot boxes. So these are filled with mostly like low level loot, but there is a random chance that they're going to get like this rare item that could potentially increase their level of play. And these are sometimes rewarded to players or also must be purchased. So this information I took from the Connecticut Gambling and Gaming website, which we'll talk about resources again at the end. But if anybody has any questions about this, I think we could do a whole other training on this. I know Caitlin has done many trainings on loot boxes and skins and things like that. So I'm hoping that we'll explore that in the region. Okay, so now we have an activity. So let's talk a little bit about protective factors. So we just kind of talked a little bit about risk factors and when gaming, you know that most of the time it's not a problem, but sometimes it can lead to problems. So what can families do? And this is coming from the Powered Up program. These are the protective factors. And by definition, a protective factor is a characteristic that's associated with lowering the risk of likelihood of negative outcomes. So it's important that we understand that there are things that we can do as family members, as friends, as caregivers to build protective factors. So I'm hoping that everyone will engage in a little bit of discussion. If you guys can take a look at the different categories here and think about one thing that you could do as you leave this webinar this evening to try to build these protective factors with whether it's your own children or any other family members or any other children that are engaged with you in your life. So if you could take a moment to just pop something in the chat, we would love if we could kind of have a engaging discussion about how to build these protective factors. You can unmute too. I think there's few enough of us that we could talk about it as well, whatever you're most comfortable with. I know there's a lot here, but so whatever comes to mind, if there's a particular category that resonates with you. Darian is saying increasing participation in school sports and clubs. Great.
I think a protective factor would probably be, in my opinion, community care. Not a lot of families are able to have dinner with their children because they're working second jobs. A lot of times folks feel that, the source of video games or a phone is self-soothing, even though it's not healthy for emotional regulation. A lot of families don't know and don't think it can become a problem or a form of addiction. So for me, I would say a protective factor would be education and community care.
I love that, Elke. It makes me think of sort of that it takes a village concept, that it's not just about what the parents can do, but what can the community do to create situations where we can wrap families up with supports so that they have the time to be able to address some of these things. I think that's a really important point. Thank you for bringing that up. So let's see, we've got
There's
expectations.
A lot in the chat here, Kathy.
Yeah, I'm just taking a look at that now. Expectations and consequences, would love to hear and get guidance. Oh yeah, so Diane, that's something that we're going to talk about when we start talking about the little teaser for the Powered Up program in a few minutes. They have some really great suggestions on how to engage in very positive discipline with your children specifically about gaming. So I encourage you to participate in that. Caitlin says, looking at screen time and gaming as reinforcement, reward versus punishment. Great. Very positive. Chelsea says, for exercise, establishing regular family walks like after dinner. I love that. One of the things that we always did as a family was we sort of created traditions around things that got us all out of the house together, like a hike or going apple picking in the summer in the fall, and maybe going to the beach in the summer, things like that. And so my kids always looked forward to that. Family game nights, yep, that's great. Mixing the online versus board games, puzzles, etc. Great.
Looks like Stacy has her hand up. Might have some.
Sure. What's up, Stacy?
I was thinking of our conversation earlier about what we did when we were kids, a lot of us going to arcades or, we didn't have devices in our rooms or things. And I was thinking like there are a lot of opportunities outside the home, whether it's, bowling is kind of even electronic these days, like everything's computerized. There are arcades and indoor places to go rock climbing and still play some arcade type games. So I think like taking an interest in your kids and trying to find that, something fun that they like to do that incorporates those social things outside the home that are more like, kind of a little more like what we used to do would be great. Yeah.
It's a great idea.
That.
Yeah.
And I
taking an interest in what they like,
yeah,
right? Kathy and I were talking about that.
Exactly. Taking an interest. And I also think that I think kids like to learn the history of like what it was like when we were growing up too. So I think that's another great thing about what you just said, Stacey, is that being able to connect in that way is really neat.
Yeah.
I love this one.
Sorry. They love it when they're better than us at something. So if they try to teach us how to play their game and it's, and we're not great at it, that's fun.
Right. To explain it or to teach them or to kind of school them, like to school your parents is kind of fun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I like these other two here, preparing dinner together, setting the table, doing cleanup and talking about our day together. I love that. And I know that this is a really hard one, and going back to what Elke was saying, sometimes it's really hard to have family dinner sometimes. So, even if you can only do it once a week, having like a Sunday dinner, maybe where everybody works together and does exactly what Ruth is saying, prepare together, set the table. So everybody's in the room and you're chit-chatting along the way and kind of checking in with each other. I think that's such an awesome protective factor. It's something we talk about when we talk about underage drinking and substance use prevention as well. And I like Chelsea's idea regarding hygiene, creating little baskets in the bathroom with everything in one place so it's easier to follow a routine. That has really helped her family. Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think whatever makes things easier. I always like to say that like you have to remind your kids like 1,000 times to brush their teeth, and then you have to do it again because they just forget. So that's great. Only way I can distract my son. Oh, is that with the dinner, Ruth? You're going back to your dinner conversation there? Yeah. That's good. I like that. And car rides, such a great time to connect in the car. And if people can put there's only so many devices you can use in the car. I guess you can use their phone, but yeah. Great ideas, everybody. I love it. And Elke, thank you for keeping us sort of culturally competent as far as like making sure that we're taking everybody's needs into consideration. I really do think that that's where the community comes into play when we talk about the 40 developmental assets. I don't want to digress too far here, but you just made me think of that like, it's raising kids is really not just about families. It's about the entire community and how everybody can help. So really, really important points, guys. Thank you so much. Okay. Well, let's see how we're doing on time. It's 6:47. So you guys don't mind, I'm going to keep moving along here, and then we'll have time at the end for questions. So, Abby already mentioned that, one of the big themes of this program is balance, right? Making sure, and when we talked about that, when gaming is not a problem, when there's balance in the individual's life, right? So there's just a couple of points here, and this is coming from the Powered Up program. While video games are a common pastime for most children and teens, some do struggle with a healthy balance. So there's opportunity to kind of help with that. And parents also struggle with knowing how best to manage their teens' gaming. So what can we do to help parents and caregivers? Well, we can help them learn how to be more involved in some of these activities. I think sometimes because of our own views on gaming, we might just sort of dismiss the activity as, oh, it's just a waste of time. I don't know what you're doing. So I think it's really important that we as adults in these children's lives be curious, get involved, try to understand more about what they're doing and why, having positive conversations and just like we talked about a few minutes ago, spending time with your children, especially if they're gaming. So here's where I'm going to transition to a little bit of a teaser on the Powered Up program, because this program really can address what we're talking about here with how to maintain and establish that balance with this activity. And I just want to put a little caveat in here that, well, first of all, I want to thank the Connecticut Council on Problem Gambling for offering this opportunity for folks in the state of Connecticut to have access to this program. And as a advocate for the program, I did participate in both of the courses, so I can kind of speak to exactly what you're going to be going through if you choose to sign up for these courses. And they are free and they are short. And I'll get into that in a minute. But I did go through them myself, so I can really speak to the benefits that you will experience as you go through the program. So let's talk a little bit more about them. So this is just kind of a placeholder for accessing the courses, and I'm going to review this again as we get through the next couple of slides. But the Powered Up courses are broken down into what's called Powered Up Parent and Powered Up Player. Both of the courses can be accessed through the same website. In the Powered Up Parent course, this is where you're going to be learning as parents and caregivers how to better understand your child's video gaming, how to improve your relationship and communication with your child, and how to establish effective discipline strategies. And this is just kind of a few little bullets of what you're going to be learning, just sort of a sneak peek at what's in the program. You're going to learn about the different types of gamers, why kids play the certain games that they do, because there's different types of games. There's so many different types of games out there. A little bit about gaming and mental health. You know, mental health is such an important topic right now. Personal stories will be shared from families who've experienced, different things with their children in gaming. And also, I love this part, conversation starters. They have these awesome downloadable worksheets and handouts that you can fill out for yourself. It's almost like, some skill building of where to get started. Like, how do I begin to have these conversations with my children? And also behavior and discipline strategies. I've already mentioned this, that it's very much about a positive discipline model where you're talking with your child to kind of establish some guidelines about, how much time do you want them to spend gaming, and making sure like that you're having those discussions about taking care of other responsibilities. Setting those screen time limits and managing other fun activities, making sure that you're, creating an environment where there are other things to do, kind of like what Stacy was talking about, taking them to the arcade or going on a hike and things like that. We want to avoid demonizing or judging a child's gaming, and then learning how to utilize rewards and consequences fairly. So Caitlin just put in the chat a few minutes ago about using screen time and video gaming as sort of a reward. So thinking about different ways to kind of talk about it with your children together and kind of come up with a plan that everybody feels comfortable with and agrees with, rather than just saying, well, this is my rule and my way or the highway kind of thing. So I found the modules to be very, very beneficial with talking about positive discipline, and what they teach you can be applied really to any behavior. It doesn't have to just be about gaming. So I found that to be really good. And using gaming to connect, being curious and learning about what your children are doing. I was kind of struck by the fact that when I look back on my children, and they're in their early 20s now, they both gamed, but I did not take part in it at all. Like I didn't take the time to learn about the games they were playing. I always kind of had this unfair assumption about it, that it was a waste of time. I didn't understand it. And so one of the things I learned was that really to kind of pause and take a moment to think about why they want to spend the time that they do, and talk to them about it. Like, hey, what game are you playing? And why do you like that? Like, tell me more about it. How does it work? Maybe I should have sat down and played with them. Like I, would engage in my son's, music pursuits. If he was learning an instrument or was going to be joining the choir, what did I do? I went to his concerts. I made sure he went to rehearsals. If he was playing soccer, I went to the soccer field. So it's kind of the same thing. If you're children are involved in gaming, it's the same idea of just being curious and getting involved and asking questions. And then the Powered Up Player is going to help youth develop healthy gaming habits, having strong balance with gaming and other responsibilities and their physical and mental health, maintaining healthy relationships with their peers and their parents and caregivers. So within their program, within their course, they're going to be exploring things like what type of gamer they are to kind of help them understand why they enjoy the games that they do. And this part I think is kind of cool. Helping them to explore other interesting things to do outside of gaming. And the way the course is designed is if they like to play a particular game and maybe they can figure out what type of gamer they are, then the program helps them to explore other activities that are similar. So the example is escaping me, but like if they like to play an achievement game or something that's like really competitive, then they might enjoy joining a sport. Like they might enjoy learning how to play basketball or join the team. So it really helps them to kind of explore some of those motivations and help them to think about other things that they might find interesting outside of gaming. Healthy relationships, of course, so important with family, peers, and the community. And then again, just to focus on the importance of good nutrition, sleep, and healthy coping skills. And I think that what's taught within the Powered Up Player with respect to that, good nutrition, sleep, and healthy coping skills can really be applied to anything, right? Having healthy coping skills can help prevent substance misuse and help us deal with stress and anxiety and other mental health concerns. So there's a lot of benefits beyond how this applies to gaming. So let me see how we're doing on time. It's 6:55. Well, this is a 4-minute video, so I think what I might do is just keep going through the slides, and if we have a minute, then I might take you back to that one. But if we don't have time, because I don't want to keep you guys over, I know everybody's probably got things to do, you can access the video when we send you out the slide deck. So I just kind of gave you that teaser of the Powered Up program. I really hope that you will consider participating, and we're going to make it really easy for you to do so. I'm going to be sending out a flyer that kind of summarizes all of this as well, but if you're just using the slides here, you can either click on that link, or if you're using a phone, you can use the QR code to access the website. And what I thought I would do is actually take you there myself so you can see, except that, oh, here we go. Oh, I'm not sure why that's popping up. Okay, well, that doesn't seem to be working. Okay, I might have goofed up that link. I'll fix that before the slide goes out. But what you're going to do is just use that link, and you just scroll down the page a little bit, and it's going to ask you which course you're signing up for. If you're starting with the parent program, you click on it, and it's real simple. All you do is create a username and a password, and then you get started. Each course takes about 2 hours. It's self-paced. So if you start it and you get interrupted, or you only have 15 minutes and you're going to come back to it tomorrow, that's fine. It'll remember exactly where you left off. They make it real simple. They're broken down into little short modules. There's a lot of videos, so it kind of breaks it up. So it doesn't really feel like you're spending that much time. But I encourage you to consider it. I really found it to be worthwhile. The Powered Up Player course is designed for those aged 10 to 18. So the same thing, you're going to use that link, go to the Powered Up Player, and your child will sign up with a username and password, and they can continue on and go through the modules themselves. And I encourage you, if you're able to either do just the Powered Up Parent, that's fine. But if you're able to get your child to do it with you and then kind of have some of those family discussions about it, all the better. These are just really great tools that we hope will help, build relationships and create that balance. And we always like to, end by sharing resources. We've already shared a lot of data with some links throughout the slides. So here's a link to the American Academy of Pediatrics. I'm a real big fan of Common Sense Media. When my kids were growing up, I used it all the time to kind of check out TV shows or video games or movies if I was concerned about whether it was age appropriate. We already talked about Game Quitters. They're a great resource. If you have concerns about someone who may have problematic gaming, or you might, are concerned about gaming disorder, there are a couple of supports at the bottom of your screen there. Online Gamers Anonymous, Reboot and Recover, and KindBridge are all supports for not just gaming, but also like the Reboot and Recover is really about overuse of all technology, like all screens, social media, things like that. KindBridge is virtual behavioral health in all categories. So I encourage you to check out those websites. And we do have 2 treatment providers in Connecticut for gaming disorder. And both of them are, can connect you to treatment for those 18 and under, as well as 18 and over. So we include those 2 resources there in the highlighted in orange. And then, of course, we always want to make sure folks remember that we are a resource. We are your regional behavioral health action organization. So there's a link to our website. The Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, Problem Gambling Services is another one of our partners. They're part of our Problem Gambling Awareness Team and the Connecticut Council on Problem Gambling. Caitlin is here, and they are the folks who are sponsoring this Connecticut pilot at no cost to everyone in Connecticut who wants to participate, the Powered Up program. So we want to thank them for that. And I do see that there's a couple of things popping up in the chat. So as we get to the last slide here, we're going to take questions, but I'm also going to be dropping an evaluation